you don't know, my name is Annalise Healy and I am the author of 5 published books, and I am also a freelance editor and provider of author services. In today's video, I am going to be talking about different ways that I outline my books. So as an important background, for my first 5 books, the ones that are currently published, I was a pantser. I did not do any outlining for these books. However, for my current work in progresses, it has been an important step for me to outline so I can make sure they achieve what I want them to achieve. In today's video, I will be covering 2 different ways that I have outlined different novels. The first way is a little bit of a more in-depth way, though it still will not go as in-depth as you might see other outlines go. And I am using it for planning the first book in a series of interconnected standalones. And the second way that I'll show is one that is more aligned to being a pantser, as it is very brief and it still leaves you a lot of room for coming up with things on the spot as a pantser does. And it is also for planning the second book in a series, so it adjusts to that. So I hope what you can get out of this video is just some ideas of how you can go about outlining your book. This is not prescriptive, this is not the only way that you can do it, but this is kind of the process of how I take a resource from online and adapt it to be suited to my own needs for my own novels. So with all of that said, let's dive into the first way that I outline. So the first way of outlining that we will be looking at is based on a resource provided by Savannah Gilbert, which I will link down below. This outline is for a romance novel. Savannah does provide different ones on her website, and you can also adjust this to be suitable to your needs. So this structure breaks down your book into 3 different acts. And then within these different acts, it presents all different information to break it down again into another layer of what is expected to happen at each of those stages. So in total, this is going to give you 10 little segments, which obviously may be further broken down into chapters if you would like to outline that deep, but I usually just stay at how deep these 10 sections are. Now, what I find really helpful about this resource is it already provides you with the amount of words you should kind of be targeting at each of these stages. And I think this is for around a novel of about 80,000 words, which would be typical for the romance genres. Now, of course, you could break down and just use the percentages that are given for if you were planning a longer book, say a romantasy or a fantasy and something like that. So this resource is really flexible in that way that you can adjust the word count demands. So the resource by Savannah Gilbert is just given as a blank text document. So what I like to do is I'll just go onto Google Docs, which is my writing platform and my planning platform that I use, and I'll just put it into a table. So in the first column, I will have the name of each of the sections and how many words I should be about sitting at. So for the first one, I'll have the hook and I'll have around 800 words. And then in the second column, I will have just a little like few sentences, a few paragraphs of what is going to happen in that section. Throughout this outline, I will just put in that second column a few quick sentences, which will generally just be like, the character does this, this is what they're feeling, and then if I have any specific lines or anything that I want to use, I will put it in there. So I think the longest section for one of these, I had 2 different paragraphs for each of those 10 sections that this outline breaks it down into. So you can see this is just a very brief way of outlining what you want to happen, but I think it's really good for getting the pacing right throughout the novel. So it helps you know and hit all of those key points of when you want drama to happen and how you want that spread out over the book. And it can also get you thinking about how you want things resolved. So, and as you're looking at all of these titles, there might be an idea of an event that you knew you wanted to include but didn't know where it fit, that you go, oh, well, this would work really well in this area. So it really just helps you take all of the jumble of ideas you had and put it into a structured idea, whilst also leaving room for if you want to come in and put in new scenes in the future. So the second outline that we are going to be looking at is quite different, in the sense that I have adapted this to be used for the second book in a series, which means that the pacing, especially in the beginning, is a bit different, as you don't have to set up a whole entire world or all of the characters' backgrounds. And it is also different because it doesn't give you the word count that you expect to hit at each point, but I'll show you how I have gone about and suggested those for myself. So this outline is by The Novel Factory, and this is just their, I can't remember what it's exactly called, but it's like their general one for all types of genres, which fit this situation best. But I think they have like 8 different outlines, at least from the article that I found, that you may like to check out. Imagining that they would be similarly structured to this one, but just adjusted slightly for the genres. Because it is important to consider your genre when you are planning on outlining, because different genres will have different beats and pacing that you would want to work with if you want your book to read like a novel of that genre. Of course, you can be flexible and change some of those things if you really want to test yourself and you have purposes for it, and that exploration is really creative. But generally, you will want to stick to what is the norm in your genre. So it is good to do some research on that. So going into outlining this book, I obviously had a bit more of an idea of what I wanted to happen in this book. This included just writing down any random notes I had leading up from when I had the idea of the second book to when I was planning on outlining. So for instance, I have ideas of what I want to happen, like I want to have a balance between characters seeking their own freedom versus seeking the freedom of whole groups. And so it was just using these notes that I filled in the outline. There was a lot more to imagine as I was filling out this outline, as I didn't have any final dramas or anything like that. So having this structure really helped me understand, okay, how can I lead all of these little events that I do have ideas of up to a big drama? Let's not talk about that, and let's dive into the structure of this outline. So again, I just took this outline from online and turned it into a table like before, where in the first row I had the sections that was broken down into. Again, this one had acts, and then it also had little divisions within those. And then in the second column, I would write down the notes of what I wanted to happen at each of those points. So for this one, the first part is the status quo, where you introduce the main character's world and establish their want and need. Now, for me, I knew that being the second in a book, I was pretty well established in the world and established with the characters, but I do want to reinforce that, and because there was big changes for this book, I want to show their current situation. But again, because this is the second book in the series, I knew this would be shorter than it would be in any other novel. So I kind of kept that in mind when later on, after I explained how this outline works, how I decided going about getting word goals for each of those. So again, I went through and I read what kind of description the outline suggests of what needs to happen in each point. So in the second part, it says something needs to happen to shake the status quo. So I was like, okay, what drama could we have here? And again, I just wrote down, in this instance, it was just one sentence of what was going to happen. And this is, again, it's an outline. It shows you where you want to go with your novel, but there's still so much freedom given to you if you are a pantser. So that's why I like outlining in these ways instead of going deeper. Of course, you can go deeper if you like. So I went through, and I think it took me something like 3 minutes just to write down from the notes I made all of the little points I wanted to hit at each of those pacing marks. And once I got to the end of the book, I was like, okay, I want this book to sit around 60 to 70,000 words. And then I looked at the different areas to see how many sections there were included in the acts. So in this instance, there were 9 sections, so I knew that the sections would have to be, roughly a few of them would have to be under 10,000 words each. So I looked at it and I went, okay, what sections can take less of those words and what sections will need more of those words? So then, being the second book in a series, I knew that the beginning could be cut down, so I set those at 5,000 words each. Then, as we got into building the drama, each of those sections went up to 10,000 words. As we got to the kind of middle piece just before the next drama was realised, that was shorter, because again you want that snappier part where you turn, okay, everything is good, snap, what is happening? And that snap is going to be short for me. It's going to be a quick decision in the characters' heads of, okay, this is my decision now, what am I going to choose? Then leading up to that final drama, and in that final drama, that's obviously going to take more portion of your word count, and the resolution is going to be shorter again. Of course, depending on how many different storylines you have to draw together, this might take a bit longer, but for me, I knew that everything would kind of settle itself after the final drama pretty well, so I just set this at 5,000 words again. So I'll just put up on the screen now a quick breakdown of how I decided on the word counts. Now for me, these give me a lot better understanding of the pacing of my novel and helping me get everything that I want to get right. So in my first draft, there is not too much that I feel needs to change with the overall storyline, and a lot of things, it helps to get things resolved and make sure things don't get left in the past. As has been obvious though, these outlines that I use do still leave you with a lot of freedom with deciding on what you want to do in the moment as you're writing, if you come up with anything new that you want to add in. And so that's why I would highly recommend outlining like this to pantsers or plotters that are just looking for something simpler. This is also a great starting point for plotters that want to go further into detail. Once you get these first markings, then you can break down each of those sections into your chapters and do a chapter by chapter outline based on these, or any other methods of outlining that can be built onto these. So in all, I hope this has helped you with understanding how I outline my novels. If you have any other questions, you can either put them in the comments below and I'll be happy to get to them. Otherwise, you can reach out to me on my Instagram at AnnaHealy-Writes, and I'll be happy to help you with outlining your novel. See you in the next video.